And finally, joining us is another industry stalwart, Shri Rajendra S. Pawar, Executive Chairman and Co-founder, NIIT Limited. His entrepreneurial spirit and contributions to the education landscape are unparalleled. He established with a vision of being the role model of learning, research, innovation, and sustainability for the knowledge society. Under his leadership, NIIT has played a key role in shaping the growth of the Indian IT sector by creating skilled manpower to drive its momentum. May I welcome on stage Shri Rajendra S. Pawar.
Whatever had to be said about what we should do with education has already been said by the bureaucrat who runs policy making and by Dr. Jere, biologist, biotechnologist, and therefore person specializing in life forms and who's now taken to innovation as perhaps the most important skill that we need to learn. So I'll therefore cut down a bit of what I intended to speak rather than repeat it, but perhaps to step back a little and see the context that has changed. Because all of us have to respond to the changing context. So I want to touch on four things. One is about life expectancy and the very much elongated work life. What impact does that have on learning and education? The second aspect of the context I want to speak about is the 21st century, which I call the century of the mind. And what does that mean for how education should change? And from there, I want to therefore talk about what are the skills of the mind, the cognitive skills, which cut across disciplines, cut across subjects. And finally, I just want to share the experience that I have been through quite a bit of it, but last 15 years in setting up the university, the NIIT University. What we chose as a few areas where we had to be distinctive, because there are universities, and each one should play some role to change education. The first point is about life expectancy. So, I am 73. I worked for 63 years. Maybe I'll be active for 2 more years before I finally do more things that I like to do. So a 65-year work life. But from whatever we hear and read, the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha will live up to about 100 years. That's the average life expectancy, and will therefore have a working life of 80 years. In a time when the idea of one career, one subject vanished more than 20 years ago. So one implication of this, and obviously the gig workers, which means there isn't even an idea of staying in a job, or the idea of someone who was doing 7 jobs during COVID at the same time, being seen as wrong but may become natural. So therefore, the number of jobs youngsters will do is indeterminate. We have to prepare education for that. And I think the number of different professions each of these young people will pursue, maybe up to 5 in my view. Unrelated, different professions as we see them as unrelated. We prepare people for a profession. And if in their work span of 80 years, they'll have 5 different professions. We have to prepare education for that. So this is one implication of a much more elongated work life. The second contextual point is the 21st century. I called it the century of the mind, because society has gone from the agrarian era, which was all about land, labor and cattle, to the industrial era, which was about machines, to the knowledge era, which started in the late 80s and 90s, where the emphasis shifted to information as the basis. And so we entered an era of dealing with bits and not atoms, to put it in very simple terms. Because the raw material in the industrial era was some material, which was atoms. And the process we were engaged with was to transform those set of atoms into another set of atoms, so raw material to finished goods. And they were machines. And the human was an undesirable appendage to that. And if you remember the industrial strife and the industrial strikes of the period of time was because in this process of transforming atoms from one form to another, the machine was taking charge and the human becoming redundant. This has changed radically in this knowledge era, because in this era the machine is here. The raw material is information and the finished goods is information. So in this century, why I call it the century of the mind is the preoccupation is not with the machine. They're important, they will be important, but it's with the mind. And therefore, in this second point, let's understand one thing, that we've lived in a mentality of scarcity. We have an economics which is predicated on scarcity. So the economics of scarcity says that price is determined by demand and supply, right? All of us know that something is short supply, prices go up. And therefore, distribution of wealth, redistribution of engagement is with matter which is limited. There's an estimate that 1.3 into 10 to the power of 50 is roughly the number of atoms on earth. They will not increase. So it's no surprise that there is scarcity mentality. But when you look at bits, the bits of information, they are unlimited in nature. This very simple fact is changing human minds to go from a mentality of scarcity, where I don't want to share, to a mentality of abundance. We can share. So if you make a piece of music, very high resolution, maybe 20 megabytes, you can copy it infinite number of times with virtually no cost. So this second aspect, which is the century of the mind, therefore translates into recognizing that the focus of education has to go on the machine, which is the human mind. So many in this room, or maybe few in this room, would recall the serial called Star Trek we used to watch at the end of school, college days. And the line was, space, the ultimate frontier, where no man has, to go boldly where no man has gone before. That was a fantastic science fiction thing. But we now recognize that that is not the final frontier. The final frontier is actually the human mind, which we don't fully understand. We understand very little. And therefore, the third point I wanted to make is, therefore, if that is going to be a preoccupation in this century, what are the skills of the mind? That is what education has to feed. So it's showing up in many different studies in the last 10 or 15 years. We use many different words. For example, soft skills is a word which has come out of nowhere. Study after study is saying that collaboration is important, communication is important. Those are all skills of the mind, the cognitive skills, and I'm just listing 5 of them, which are talked of, because education now has to get repurposed on this, rather than domain knowledge, which will change because I don't know what job I'll be doing tomorrow. So critical thinking, we're all talking about it for a long time now. Creative problem solving, linked but different skill. Communication. Collaboration and community. And I would put the 5th, which is continuous learning as a skill. If I have to do 100 different jobs in 5 different professions, at the age of 70, I may decide to now do law. So the cognitive skills have to be the thrust and focus of education. And it's interesting, I was reading this morning that Tagore's view that what should education do for us and what should be the focus. He said, he named 3 things. He said creativity and imagination, building that skill. He said kinship or relationship with nature as a skill to build. And eventually we've all heard his line of mind without fear. So he said, freedom for the learner. Those should be the defining characteristics for education. And now I just want to comment in closing on my own experience, which I'm trying to apply in the university we created 15 years ago. Because I've had the good fortune as an alumnus of IIT Delhi to have been on the board for 15 years, to be on the board of IIM Bangalore for a full term and Jodhpur, and I'm one of the founder members of the team that created the Indian School of Business. And last 15 years ago, 2009, we started the university, and we thought very deeply about what the role of the university should be. We thought very deeply about what education, higher education should mean. And we then said, okay, if we have to do something different, what should be distinctive? What should be different? What should we become really good at as our focus to contribute to the process of higher education? And we chose, with a lot of persuasion, our first chancellor was Dr. Karan Singh, perhaps the best known living philosopher, because we thought that the moorings and the DNA of the university should be set in good philosophy. And our current chancellor is Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who's been the author of the NEP. And he's been involved with the university in one way or the other since inception. In fact, before inception, 2005. But he's the current chancellor since 2019. And as a university, we just put a line that's the university of the future. Because we said that this is going to change so much that if we don't put our eyes on the future, we'll have difficulties. So we've identified 4 what we call as core principles as an essence of what we should focus on, and after listing them, I'll close. And they have been referred to very differently in the earlier 2 talks as well. So the first, we said that university has to be distinctive in 4 things. The first is work-integrated learning. So the world of study and the world of work are 2 separate things. It's been said before, but today, and I did want to refer to some of the points which were made, that half our students are doing undergrad, the other half are working professional coming in and out doing their programs, half, master's type. And those are working professionals. As we speak, we have a batch from Infosys, 60 students, who worked in Infosys for 6 or 7 years. They have their own campus, as you know, but cybersecurity, which is one of the specializations, they are coming to do a master's in cybersecurity. And they are sitting with the BTechs in class. So that's happening for the last many years. And many other things of linking the world of study to the world of work. We think we are already a benchmark institution in this regard. And this also comes from the genesis and the legacy of NIIT Limited. The second core principle is to be technology based. And I want to underline one point, that technology in learning is less important than the science in learning. Remember, technology is the pragmatic implementation of science. Science is the real theory. So instead of saying put devices, put computers, that's the technology, we have to think about how students learn, not how teachers teach. We heard enough about saying who wants to listen to teachers. Of course we want to listen to teachers, but the focus has to shift from teaching to learning. It's a fundamental shift. So at the university, we are committed to every student who comes. Before convocation, every one of our students has a job in hand, or 25% of them are going for higher education. They're on the path. One learner at a time. So technology based obviously implies technology, but I think there's learning science which we need to understand. I talked about the mental skills, the cognitive skills. How do people learn? Why do people learn? Do you know that we still don't know how memory is formed? We still don't know. So the final frontier is not space, it's the human mind. As we learn about it, we have to see how students learn. So that's the second. The third core principle, when we started the university, we said it should be research driven. And 5 years into that period, we realized that research has changed. In the industrial era, the research meant $1 billion lab. It meant 10 years to get a patent. And then you needed to protect the patent, so intellectual property regime, to protect your patent so you can recover your money. That has changed. in the century of the mind. A college student can think of an idea, we call them entrepreneurs, we call it startups, but they can construct economic value with an idea while in college. I don't recommend to students not to finish college. I think it's very crucial. We heard some of those issues as well, the socialization, the interpersonal capability, building relationships. If you look at the 5 cognitive skills which I talked about, all of them have to be nurtured and built in this period in college. So we decided at the end of 5 years that research was a very limiting word. So I am very much against counting patents applied for in the university as a measure. I'm against it. In fact, the researchers from IBM were telling me they don't count patents anymore. They don't, because it's taken people into the wrong direction. And there are also patents applied. Nobody sees what happens to them. So the measures have to change. So we said it's not research driven. We say research, discovery and entrepreneurship. That is the student's preoccupation. And the key word is curiosity. All of us in class 1 were 100% curious. By class 10 we lost it. By class 12 we didn't, teacher looking at us, ask a question, we look the other side. So it suppresses. And we are focused in a sense to say, can we revive that? Because that's what is needed in the century of the mind. And the 4th core principle we look at is we use the word seamless, which is connecting across disciplines. We do not have departments in a university. There's no department. Student can pick choices, faculty can pick choices, and you navigate your path, you build your path. We talked about that. We've been doing it from 2009. So seamless in disciplines. It's a very easy part. It's an old problem, multidisciplinarity, 50-year-old problem which society is trying to solve. But there's also a connection with your society. The society that, so we are in Nimrana. So every student at NU has to go and teach in the government school in Nimrana for X number of hours as part of the curriculum. They have to understand the context in which they're working. And then we have a forest next to us. We have 100 acres, but we have a hillock of, the Aravalli is 1,000 acres. We've adopted that to green it to the place it used to be 100 years ago. So with nature, man and nature, that's the biggest divide which all of us are suffering from. So seamlessness, in fact, that was a great contribution by Dr. Karan Singh as the first chancellor. And he gave us a motto, which is Anadi Anand, without beginning, without end. So seamlessness is, in fact, is the mother of the 4 core principles. We believe that all of society's breaking up is happening because we have everything going in divides, all kind of divides. Look at reservation as a divide. So divides have to be got rid of, and students have to have a holistic mind. And so therefore, I just wanted to give you more the context within which we should design, because no one has a solution. I don't have a solution. I have only something that we are doing ourselves and finding it very useful, and which is to pick the areas in which you want to focus as an institution. And students will get engaged because you are working on stuff which is work integrated, which is science driven, which is entrepreneurship based, and which is relevant to society. So with that, thanks so much.